Okay, let's talk about working with polygons. I'm going to create another cube, and I'm going to make this cube editable. And I'm going to switch my layout to modeling so we can have our tools located at the bottom. So we have to keep going up to the drop-down menu. But I'm going to show you what's at the drop-down menu as well as what's at the bottom of the screen. And as you get more familiar with the software, you can kind of work in your own layout, but this is good to know what comes up when you're selecting certain areas of the polygon face. So I'm going to switch to my polygon tool here. And you notice that now our menu kind of lights up at the bottom. We see a couple of things actually happening. If I go to my structure pull down, we see the exact same thing. We have the add point. We can bridge polygons. We can brush them to pull out certain areas of the polygon. We can close up polygon holes. We can create new polygons, dissolve them to actually create any type of triangle polygons we have to make quads. We can iron out the surface to make it more even. We can cut the surface using the knife tool. We can pull out the surface using the magnet tool. We can work as we're modeling on one side of an object, and we can mirror it to make a symmetry and a complete object. We can set point values. We can stitch and sew, meaning that we can stitch up areas that have 5-sided or 3-sided polygons, and we can make those into 4, and we can sew them back in together, kind of like somewhat like the weld, which we'll talk about next, but it's sewing in together to make it more even inside of the mesh. We have the weld tool. We can weld areas in together to make tighter niches or tighter edges onto the polygon surface. We can actually weigh the hypernerves if we're using hypernerves to create subdivisional surfaces. And then we have our basic tools. We have the bevel, the extrude enter, the matrix extrude, and the smooth shift. Okay. We see we have these same exact things at the bottom here. So first thing I'm going to do is go in and I'm going to start some type of a model. So I'm going to select this polygon face and I'm going to use extrude. You notice that when I click on the extrude button, there's a little icon that comes up, and the only thing I have to do is click and drag. You see now we've created a new polygon face. Okay. And once we have this tool set selected, it would always work from that point on. You notice in our attributes manager we can control a lot of things too, as to the number of subdivisions. Right now we have 0. Okay, so we can also increase that to 1. You notice that now when we create that polygon, grab the polygon face and extrude it out, we only had one other polygon on each side, which would be 4. But now we add in more subdivisions to make more details. We have a great number of faces that we're adding on just by extruding that one polygon face. So I'm going to switch that back to 1 right now. Okay, I'm going to grab another face and I'm going to drag up. Okay, and then I'm going to grab this face here and I'm going to drag out. All right. So right now we just have this kind of a weird geometrical shape here. I'm going to hit my live tool to deselect it. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is go in and we're going to work in onto a bevel. So this is the bevel icon here. Okay, so I'm going to grab a face and I'm going to drag. And you notice that with the bevel, it pulls out the polygon face but also scales it down. So you have more of a rounded area. So I'll show you this example here, and I can pull this out. Okay, you see now we have a new polygon face here with new geometry, but it's now scaled down to make it look smaller. Beveling is good if you want to show in a lot of smoothing or rounded sides with details. So I'm going to click on here and show you an example real quick. So click, drag, click, drag, click, drag. You notice that now I'm creating more polygon faces, but you see it's more of a rounded kind of an area. Okay, it's not pretty much very blocky. It's a little bit more rounder. And you will note that the number of polygon faces that you create, the more organic the model will look. Okay, so that's going to be kind of crucial, especially when we're talking about the edge tools and work with edge loop technology. So I'm going to go back to my structure menu, and I'm going to flip back and forth between the drop down at the bottom and the structure menu at top here. And I'm going to go to extrude enter. And extrude enter does something a little bit more different. I'm going to select this face here. Okay, and I'm going to click and drag. Extrude enter scales it out first, but it doesn't give you the option of pulling out, creating a new polygon face. It creates a new face, but say if you're creating an eye socket, for example, you don't need to pull it out like we did with the bevel. I'm going to make this socket here, click and drag, make it there. Okay. So now we have the eye socket, then we also have enough geometry to make eyelids around so the eye can actually blink. So it's a little bit different between the bevel, and that's the one crucial purpose of it. Next, I want to grab another polygon face, go back to my live tool, and I want to use what's called extrude, a matrix extrude. Now this is very interesting, and I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to go to my attributes manager. This is very important, but you can create some very nice geometrical shapes with this. More things like tentacles, wires, things of that sort. So I'm going to click and drag first and show you what it looks like, and then I'm going to go back and redo this step and talk you through the attributes manager. So I'm going to click and drag. Okay, and there it is. That is our extrude. Enter what we actually used there. Our matrix extrude, sorry, that we used. Now, what just happened? Okay, if we look at this part here, okay, and I'm going to go back to that tool. Let me click off. You see we have 8 steps, so you can count the faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. On each side of this, we're creating 8 faces or 8 steps as we go up. We're moving up to 50 centimeters up in the air, so it's going to go up to a measurement of 50 centimeters. This is the face that we're selecting onto. Now also something else happens. We have a rotation of 10, so you see now we're going into, in the x-axis, a kind of a curve, a rotation of 10 here is going up. And we have the scale that's going up each increment at 80%. So let's change some of these around here. Let's go in, I'm going to add in 10. Okay, and I'm going to move this up, say 30. Okay, and now you want it to that axis, and you see this already, it's editing this now as we go across. So you can actually, once you have that face selected, you can edit to work with the existing matrix extrude, or you can start fresh and new. And I'm going to show you this rotation here. So I'm going to bring this back up. Bring it back up to 0. Now, the thing about it is that since we had the scale going up in X, Y, and Z, you see that we still get this kind of a curve here. So I'm going to try a new face, and I'm going to click and drag. And you see now with the new face, we just come straight out. I mean, now we have 10 faces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We have the face actually selected, and we see that we're coming out 30 centimeters out. Okay, we're not having any curve because there's no rotation. Okay, so you can see how you can control this, and you can make some really interesting things, especially with character animation. You don't really have to worry about creating hair because you have the hair module within Cinema 4D. But what if your character has really spiky, stiff hair? This matrix extrude is a good way of using that modeling function to create the spiky hair. Okay. So let's go to variation. You see that right now there's no variation because it says none, so this will be automatically equal. If we go to initial, you see now that something happens. Okay, you see that the scale goes in to initial as it goes from the start and then thins out to a point. We can also go into per step, and you see that it's still a lot smaller than when we say none, so it's more control. So you want something more control, you use per step, or if you want this effect, just the initial first 2 polygons that are actually generated from the 10 steps, for example, you would go into initial. And you can go in and control how you want this to move. Move in maximum 100 or a minimum 50%. So you can go in and add even more detail into this as you go. So you see I move this up to, say, 115. Okay, and you see now it's jetted out a little bit more. I can move the scale up a little bit more. You see now it's becoming a lot fatter. So you can really go in and edit this into more detail. You're not just pretty much edged in stone as clicking and dragging through. And then for the rotation, we can kind of move things around, but rotation really wasn't affected until you can really affect it here. So I can move this rotation around, okay, and I can go it that way, or I can spin it. Okay, and one thing you have to remember that you can right mouse click on this. Okay, you can add to HUD. At a certain point you can actually keyframe this. If you have an auto key, you can keyframe these different measures, so you can work into the HUD as you're working. You have to go back to the attributes manager to look at this. Okay, so we've talked about 2 tools so far. All right, 3 tools. So I'm going to go in now and start working on some different things here. So let's go into the magnet tool, which is very crucial. You see now that what the magnet tool does is it picks up certain polygon or points. So it's going to pick up an area with a point there. I'm going to grab this area here and I'm going to drag it out. And you see it's pretty much more like using a sculptor method where you're taking the point and pulling it out. Try it here, pull it out here a little bit more. So I'm going in now, adding in some dents, say per se, or just adding in or molding or sculpting more detail to this object that I'm creating here. There's a couple different modes you can work with if you look in the Attributes Manager. You can go in and select from Bell or Dome. And you see that a dome is a little bit more different here than a bell. You can go to a circle or a needle, and a needle will actually pull it out to a fine point. Okay. And you can go to a spline. Okay, and that goes in just to the curve itself. Okay, so see, I can go in and in detail just kind of carve this out with the brush tool. Okay, I'm just going to keep that onto a bell. Okay, you can see to the nearest point if I wanted the options to select, or if I want to go in, say, to surface. Okay, you see I want to affect the surface. Not that much different from the nearest point because we don't have a lot of points or polygon faces in the area. The more faces you add, the little bit more detail it will become. Right. And I'm going to go in next and we're going to talk about a weld. Okay. But before that, I want to talk about the knife tool because we need some faces here. I'm going to use a line. Okay, I can use a loop. When we talk about edge looping, we'll use the loop a little bit more better to show you how to use the edge loop technology and the edge loop modeling method. But right now, I'm just going to use a line. And see, I'm going to select that, and automatically now there's a cut there. So now instead of one polygon face, I have two. Okay, I can go into a line here, click and drag. So right now I'm adding in polygon faces onto the existing faces here just by using the knife tool and cutting them. Okay. Going in now to the Arn tool. Okay, and the Arn tool pretty much arns out. You see now with the tool selected, I'm clicking and dragging, and the models look a little bit more organic up the top. Okay, you see right here, it's the percentage that's controlling in the angle. So we want a 180 degrees angle to get something really rounded. Okay. So we want it really organic, and you see the plus or minus percentage. Right now, at a -% we're getting more blockiness. At a more positive, we're getting more roundness here. So it's pretty much like a smoothing tool, but not you really smoothing it. You're just ironing out your polygon sides to make it look more organic, the model look more organic, and work a little bit better for you. Now let's go into the weld tool. And the weld tool pretty much works best with points, so we'll talk about that, but you'll be able to select a number of points, switch back to polygon mode to weld in different areas. Just want to show you that it is active in the polygon tool mode, but it works better with the points mode. Now if we go to functions, I'm going to show you a couple more things. We have this model kind of created here, and I want to go in, you want to add some detail to it. So I'm going to go and say Subdivide. And this gives you a couple options. The dialog menu will pop up, and I want one subdivision right now. Let's just show you an example. And it asks you if you want to use Hypernerve Subdivide or you just want to use a plain Subdivide. For right now, we're going to use just a plain subdivision method here. But when we talk into Hypernerves a little bit more, I'll go in that and show you in a lot more detail what's the difference between a Hypernerve Subdivide versus a regular Subdivide. So I'm going to click OK. You see now there's 1% of faces that are adding on to this object now. So now it's a little bit more organic. So we do go back to our brush tool. Okay, you see now we have a more organic surface to work with here. We're not just pulling out sharp faces here. We have more organic to work with. Okay. So go back in, undo these steps really quick. Okay, and we're going to go back in and we're going to do and subdivide again. So that was 1. What if we do something like 4? Okay, add 4 and say OK. You see now that it's fully detailed, meaning that for every face, it's going to divide into 4. So there's a lot more detail. And you notice when you add in this much of polygon faces here, your viewport will start to move a little bit slow. Okay, so you have to be careful with that. So I would say do this in increments between 1 and 2 to get a better control over the model. So let's just go in and say 2. And I think that would be perfectly right for our model here. So we have a nice detailed model. And you see now my brush tool is still selected, so I can go in and kind of pull this out. Now I can switch to my dome, and you can see the difference here of how the dome creates larger sections and pull it out. Okay. One more thing I want to actually show, and that is the smooth shift. Okay. So I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to grab a face, and I'm going to pull out. Okay. You see, smooth shift still has the same type of effect that the extrude does. But if I go in and say select all, okay, and do it, you'll see now that's a little bit more organic here, where we're having a combination of an extrude inner and extrude a bevel all in one. So you see this one face here that's jetted out is starting to make a more rounded area. Okay, good for certain areas of characters, vehicles, or props. It's not something you want to do too much because you're adding more faces. The trick to polygon modeling is to work with the faces that you need. If you start out with too many faces, you'll start out with a lot of problems. It's best to start with few faces as possible and add on to what you actually need to create the model of your choice. So this goes into some detail of using the surface tools and using the polygon tools. And you see what tools are activated. What we're going to do next is go in and continue with this model and use the edge tool to show you how to use the edge loop technology and to talk about the different types of tools that are available while the edge tool is selected.